buongiorno or buonasera, depending on what time of the day you're listening to me. I am Millicent Marcus, professor of Italian at Yale University, and I'm the author of a series of books on Italian cinema. I had the great privilege to meet Giuseppe Tornatore in the spring of 2003 in Philadelphia when he presented his Cinema Paradiso to a packed and reverent audience, and I served as his on-stage translator. It forced me to enter into the mind of the person I was translating so that I could anticipate his thought process and formulate those thoughts in English just as soon as they were articulated in Italian. So a very intimate bond was forged between us for those 40 minutes of translation time, and it gave me a privileged glimpse into a brilliant creative mind. Now I have the daunting and intimate task of guiding you through this marvelous film by means of the running commentary. From time to time, I'll be joined by Tornatore with his thoughts about how this film came to be, anecdotes about the production, and the place that the film holds in his heart. Now, this credit sequence really primes us for many, many of the elements of the film to come. It's very classically composed. The music that we're hearing is called the Nostalgia Theme by Ennio Morricone, the wonderful composer. We're seeing an image of solitude here. We have one vase. We have one shoot of a plant. We have one vessel far out at sea. So the theme of loneliness and of singularity is immediately announced. The scene that we're seeing now is very stage-like. We have the beautiful fluttering diaphanous curtain. As the camera pulls back, we're going to be seeing sort of the wings, the windows that sort of mark the wings of the stage. And everything is beautifully centered and symmetrical, according to the classicism of this filmmaker's vision. As we pull back, we're going to see that everything is in perfect alignment along a kind of axis that's going to run from the vase on the veranda to a bowl of fruit. We can't quite make out what that fruit is now, but we'll see that it is the lemon, which is the sort of trademark fruit of Sicily. And now we get the title of the film, which is Nuovo Cinema Paradiso, not Cinema Paradiso, and we'll talk about the meaning of that in just a minute. Now we hear a voice. It's disembodied, but we see it's the voice of an older woman. She is the mother, and she is calling into being her son by naming him. We know that this is Sicily. This is Sicilianità of the film is very, very important. It's very much about place. But there's a sense of absent. Her son is not there. The son is a kind of void. There's this terrible sense of loss at the very beginning of this film. The interior of the house is dark and shadowy. We have a feeling of futility. Mama, it's no use calling. We have a feeling of loss and absence. There's a void. The main character is a cipher to us at this point. But the mother is sure, she has faith that he will remember and that he will come back. Now we see that the fruit is, in fact, the lemon. The lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the lemon is impossible to eat. This is a kind of Sicilian logo that will play throughout the film. Now we cut to Rome. We're in the center of things. This is the Victor Emmanuel Monument. Again, we have this sort of very centered classical cinematography of Tornatore, very balanced and symmetrical. And now we're seeing our main character. Cut to his apartment. It is palatial. It is absolutely elegant. He's obviously a man who has made it, but the space that he lives in is cold. It's, I think, been filmed with a blue filter. There's a sense of emptiness here at the heart of his home life. He walks into the bedroom, and he walks into darkness, but right away notice the wind chimes. We're going to see in soft focus, and then they're going to, through rack focus, become sharply defined. And much more about that in a minute. The lights turned on. Only now do we realize that Salvatore is not alone, that there is someone in his bedroom. The camera pans over to the bed, and we see that there's a beautiful young woman asleep. But he seems somehow perfunctory about her. He seems not to be completely involved with the person who's sharing his bed. She tells him about the phone call with the mother. The young woman was on the other end of the phone call that we saw at the beginning, at the end of the credit sequence. Salvatore is not very interested in what the mother has to say, but the young woman says, "Someone died, un certo Alfredo," and suddenly Salvatore's indifference is shattered. He suddenly seems to care about something. And in the background, we're hearing thunder. So nature is telling us that something momentous has just been announced. And he turns away from her, and he turns into himself. We feel he withdraws into a place deep within himself. Notice the shadow on his face, and the shadow is the shadow of the wind chimes that we saw. And now we hear the sound of the wind chimes, and this is going to lead us to the flashback. We realize that now we're entering into Salvatore's memory, and most of the film we're going to be within his consciousness. But it's the bell that is going to lead him into the past, and this is this beautiful continuity of this film, and is often acoustic continuity. It's going to be the bell of the altar boy, of the little Salvatore. We're going to call him Totò, which is his nickname. He's 9 years old, and he's asleep at the altar. We'll find out later why, but the wonderful priest, played by the marvelous actor Leopoldo Trieste, his character's name is Padre Adelfio, needs the bell to prompt him to the various parts of the Mass. Notice that we're getting the sacrament of the Eucharist. More about that in a minute. Now we're in the sacristy, and Father Adelfio is chiding Totò for falling asleep. We find out Totò falls asleep because he's hungry, and that the veterinarian is the one who diagnosed him. This is an indication of the shortage, the privations of life in post-war Italy, which, if this were a neorealist film, would be the source of great concern. Here it's the source of humor. A quick shot of a statue. This is one of the many recalls of Fellini that we'll talk about. And as Father Adelfio enters the movie theater, we saw just then a statue of the Virgin. Now we're in the parish movie theater. Many of the movie theaters in post-war Italy were attached to churches, and they were places of wholesome entertainment for the congregation, for the neighborhood. And now we meet Alfredo, and he's called into being by the priest, who calls him called Alfredo. We see his focus on the technology of the film viewing experience. And here we have the convergence of three gazes. The gaze of the boy, who's seeing something he's not supposed to see. He's a voyeur. The gaze of the priest, which is a moralizing, censoring gaze. and the gaze of Alfredo, which is the technical gaze. And these three gazes are coming together, and they will form a composite gaze that will then be the basis of our gaze as spectators of this film. The movie we're seeing is The Lower Depths by Jean Renoir, starring Jean Gabin. We see Father Adelphio ready with his little bell, his censorship bell, to edit out any scenes he considers unseemly for his audience. But Totò gets to see what is being edited out. And what Alfredo does is he sticks little pieces of paper in the reel for the scenes that must be deleted. Here's a fourth gaze now. This is the gaze of an on-screen character, the villain, who looks at the audience, and Father Adelphio seems to answer his gaze. Totò is also, his eyes are popping in wonder. We see Father Adelphio being carried away by the movie. He's being seduced by it, but he knows that at a certain point he must be vigilant. We see his furrowed brow as he rings the bell of censorship. And again, the three gazes are all it's a triangulation of gazes that are coming together in this scene. One more imminent kiss needing censorship. Father Adelphio isn't quite sure, but he becomes more, no. And now this bell, the bell of censorship, becomes another bell. And this is the brilliance and the beautiful craftsmanship of this film, the continuity of images, both visual and acoustic. Now it's the bell tower of the town, which is the symbol of the town. And we get the framing, the beautiful way that the camera frames through the aperture of the bell tower itself. We are being introduced to the protagonist of the film, or one of the many protagonists, which is the town, a collective character. Much of the life of this town is lived publicly. We have the women washing their hair. Remember, most of the houses did not have running water at the time, filling up the flask with water. And now this panorama of the town culminates in the facade of the movie house, the Cinema Paradiso. We're back in the projection booth, and we have Totò, who just can't resist being there with Alfredo. Alfredo issues the first of many warnings about the flammability of this celluloid strip, of the silver nitrate. These warnings are going to be planted throughout the first part of the film, and they're going to, of course, culminate in the terrible fire that destroys the movie house. There's an intense focus on the materiality of the cinematic medium, and the way in which the celluloid strip is simply a series of still photographs, which, when projected at a certain speed, produce the illusion of movement. The little boy Totò is absolutely fascinated by this technology, and he wants to possess himself of the fragments of film that have been edited out of the movie, thanks to Father Adelphio's censorship. Here, Totò calls the bluff of Alfredo and realizes that Alfredo has been keeping the censored footage. And Totò manipulates Alfredo, we'll see, into ultimately forfeiting this footage and giving it to the little boy, provided that the little boy get out of there. But Totò is clever and sly, little boy, and he will stop at nothing to get what he needs to become the fledgling filmmaker that we'll see him become. He runs off, and now we see him at home. The fruit of the lemons there, and the forbidden fruit of the edited out footage. But here we see that the little Totò is already a filmmaker. He understands that film is made of little bits and pieces of celluloid strip, of still photographs, about which we tell stories. He's already figured out genre. He's figured out the genre of the Western. We see that his mother is a seamstress, that this is how she is supporting her family. We see family photographs. So these still photographs are going to make up another film, the film of Totò's life. And we see in these still photos that the father is absent, that he has been taken on the Russian front, the terrible military campaign that took place between June 1941 and January 1943. 200,000 Italian soldiers were sent to Russia ill-equipped, not prepared for the rigors of the Russian winter. Of the 200,000 sent over, 115,000 died and 60,000 were held prisoner. More about that later. Cut to the school in this sort of imposing medieval Sicilian building, very formidable building, but the children are not daunted by it. They riotously enter school. This is the ritual of the parents leaving off their children in the morning. And we see a father chiding his son as a lazy bones. Totò is obviously not one of the lazy bones. We have the terrifying math teacher. I think that this is a homage to Fellini, to Amarcord, the scenes in the schoolroom, the raucous, almost carnivalesque atmosphere of the classroom. And here we have a character named Leonardo, but his nickname is Boccia. Bocciare in Italian means to flunk. And he's the class dimwit. Boccia can't multiply 5 by 5. And we see the teacher has no compunctions about corporal punishment here. Totò wants to rescue Boccia by giving him a hint about the number 25, but Boccia's too dense to get it, and comes up with the ridiculous answer of Natale, which to the hilarity of the whole class, and bringing down more punishment. Now a beautiful cut to a clobbering, but this time it's a hammering of the reel of film back in the projection booth. Totò's been banished from the booth, but he simply cannot resist. He just gravitates naturally towards that place, and constantly spying on Alfredo, on Alfredo's own technical activities, which continue to fascinate Totò. This is Leo Gulotto, who plays the usher. He's never named in the film, but he's a wonderful minor character and a beloved actor. Here we are in the movie theater, the place of cheerful mayhem. And we have John Wayne starring in Stagecoach. At this point, we see the total physical involvement of the audience in the filmmaking, in the film viewing process. They hoop. Oh, this is this character in the balcony we'll see throughout the film. This man who's entering is not named, but I'm going to call him Gianni. I'll tell you why later. But Gianni is a wonderful, vivid, minor character. We see that the theater is divided into the balcony and the pit. The balcony is for the more affluent customers. Here we have a documentary about the resistance entitled The Italians Do Not Forget. But these Italians seem to have forgotten. They do not want to watch newsreels. They don't want to be reminded of the bad old days. And particularly, Totò is much more interested, of course, in the sort of fantastical images that come out of the mouth of the lion. This is Visconti's 1948 neoreal realist masterpiece called La Terra Trema. It was filmed in Sicily in a tiny village, but it's such a pure example of neorealism that it was the dialect of this little fishing town is the dialect of the film. No one on the mainland could understand this dialect, and other Sicilians couldn't either. So Visconti resorted to written intertitles, but as you can see, these particular spectators are illiterate, and they can't understand. Now they can understand the Italian voiceover. This is a film about the plight of Sicilian fishermen who choose not to sell their fish to middlemen, but to circumvent the capitalist system and to sell directly to consumers. So it's a anti-capitalist message, and a message to the poor and exploited workers of Sicily. Here we have the love scene, which of course is edited out, had been edited out by Padre Adolfo. It's one of the most chaste kisses you could imagine, and yet the priest deemed it inappropriate for his audience. This is probably the only part of the film that the audience really would have engaged with, and it has been cut, as you can see. Here we have I'm calling this character the spitter in the balcony. We'll see him spitting down in contempt throughout the film. And now we have Charlie Chaplin and the wonderful slapstick humor of this film, which appeals so intensely to this audience that it's riotously involved in what they're seeing on the stage. Here's the Johnny, who is not amused for some reason. Now we have the piazza at dusk, and it's the picturesque charm of this film. Again, a view from the bell tower and over. Now what we see is the mafia boss of this town, Don Vincenzo, has total control of the employment of the town. And what we see is that the film by Visconti that has just been shown about circumventing the monopolistic hold of the bosses and selling directly to customers, that message has not been understood by the audience of La Terra Trema. And the men passively surrender to Don Vincenzo's hold on employment. So that this is a critique of neorealism on the part of Tornatore, who's basically saying that neorealism failed in getting its message across, in connecting with the masses. Now we have a rather touching scene in which Alfredo is going to intervene to save Totò from the wrath of his mother. Totò has spent the 50 lira she gave him to buy milk. He spent it to buy a movie ticket. And she is about to discipline him rather harshly. But Alfredo is going to come to the rescue in a very delicate scene of sort of understanding and a desire to help the young boy. He stops the beating of the child, and he comes up with an expedient that allows him to actually give back the money, actually pay the money over to Maria, his mother, and allowing Maria at the same time to save face, even though she knows on some level that she's accepting charity from Alfredo. And the usher, who is a little bit simple-minded but very well-intentioned, is coaxed to sort of play along with this expedient. And now Maria can, in fact, accept the money, and Totò is out of the woods, so to speak. We have the wink of understanding between the man and the boy. And the usher realizes that he has been the inadvertent accomplice to this good act. Now we have the town crazy, il matto, il pazzo, another homage to Fellini. Fellini always had the town crazy, the village idiot, in all of his films, and this is clearly a takeoff on that. Fellini is going to be paid tribute to throughout this film. Fellini is one of Tornatore's most important influences, as he has said. Cut now to a pathetic but picturesque scene in the countryside outside the town. Here we have a funeral, and Totò and Father Adelphio are presiding. As we see the little card, we realize it's a baby that's died. And with the card is an example of the beautiful Sicilian decorated carretti. Tornatore himself, in his early movie career, was dedicated to documentaries about Sicilian folk life. And in fact, one of his documentaries is called Il Carro, which is the Sicilian cart, these beautiful decorated carts that we just saw. The film will be filled with folkloristic touches that hark back to Tornatore's experience as documentarist. Now we see that Totò has become a little con artist. He is faking a foot injury so that he can get a ride. And we cut immediately to the results of his little trick to get a ride hitch a ride with Alfredo. We see that Alfredo knew Totò's father, and that Totò's father looked like Clarke Gabla, a Sicilianized version of the actor. And here we see that Totò is invoking Alfredo as a father figure. And we can see right here that Totò is immediately going to bring into relief Alfredo's childlessness, the fact that Alfredo is not a father, and that there's a kind of sterility in his life. We cut now to a scene of family turmoil. The footage that Totò has been keeping under the bed has in fact caught fire, another premonition of the great conflagration to come. Now, again, Totò is the victim of his mother's wrath and anger and frustration, and we see that the incinerated celluloid has also incinerated the image of the father, and we see that proximity with the cinema is causing the paternal image to literally fade in the mind and the life of Totò, because in fact Alfredo is going to take the place of that image with greater and greater intensity, and with sometimes ethically questionable results, as we'll get to later on. But the mother clearly sees the cinema as her adversary, as something that threatens the notion of her family unit and literally the safety of her children and her household. Here, Totò tells the mother the truth, the brutal truth as only children can. She is living in a state of denial about her husband's death on the Russian front. Now we're back in the movie theater, and I'd like you to hear what Giuseppe Tornatore has to say about the universal appeal of this film, which is so rooted in time and space, and yet it seems to reach out to so many people.
After many years, Cinema Paradiso is still in the movie theaters in a lot of parts of the world. And for me, it's a good reason to be happy, obviously. I believe the reason is because a lot of people find in the movie some feeling connected with the personal experience of the life. I was in a lot of countries with the movie, and a lot of people, many people, usually after the screening, used to come to me saying, "That's my life." Even when I was a boy in my village, I loved the little movie theater. Even when I was a boy, my uncle had a movie theater. Thousands and thousands of people. Maybe the reason is this. The relationship between the movie theaters, the idea, the experience of the movie theaters, and a lot of generations of people is so strong that a lot of people believe and they see in the experience of Totò and the Cinema Paradiso the symbol of their experience, their life.
Tua moglie mi ha detto di portarti a mangiare. Dammi qua. Ce l'ho detto a mia madre.
Even in Italy today, not in the movie theaters, but through the DVD or through television, many people love to see the movie. Even, and that's strange, the young children that cannot have the same relationship with the movie theater. It's very strange. It's stronger than I thought when I was writing the movie. In that moment, I cannot to think the possibility that the story could have in the future with the audience of the world was a big surprise for me, and an happy surprise, obviously.
At this point, Alfredo begins to recount his own story to Totò about beginning to work in the cinema at the age of 10, when the technology was even more primitive and projectors had to be cranked by hand. It was grueling physical work, and if you slowed down, as Alfredo's saying, the film would burst into flames. So again, yet one more premonition of the disaster to come. And when he opens the belly of the projector and this incredible blinding light is emitted, we see the power of this technology. Cinema Paradiso tells so many parallel stories, and one of the parallel stories that it tells is the evolution of the film medium, film technology. And I'm going to call this the techno story, and I'll refer to this as we go through the rest of the film. But here, Alfredo is saying that basically the film projectionist is a slave to the medium. He has no life. There are no holidays. In fact, we sense that he has no family life and no home life, and as we know, he's childless. But Alfredo clearly has a sense of pride in his work. He is an artisan. He is a superb craftsman, and so we get the sense that the pride and attention to detail that goes into the filmmaking process itself, which then, of course, makes us step back and think about Tornatore and the brilliant craftsmanship of this film, where every single detail is somehow a carefully thought-through part of an artistic whole. Here we have Buster Keaton's voice looking down, the Clark Gable, the gallery of stars, as Alfredo explains the sense of power and the sense of accomplishment he has when he is showing a film that makes people laugh, that makes people happy, that engages them in the world of the imagination and fantasy of cinema. Now, Totò has been carefully watching everything that Alfredo's been doing, and so he's able to correct whatever problem has occurred while Alfredo has gone to the restroom. And of course, Alfredo can't believe the ingenuity of this child, and is also impressed and admiring at the same time. We're back in the piazza where what we're going to find out, Totò is going to be banished from the Cinema Paradiso for the umpteenth time, but never, as we know, never definitively. But something is about to happen that we're going to find out that the cheering has to do with the results of a soccer game and the fact that a character, Don Ciccio, has won the lottery. Don Ciccio is a foreigner to Sicily. He's a Neapolitan, and they keep on referring to his the fact that he is from the mainland, Ciccio from Naples. And there's a wonderful joke here. It's always the northerners who get lucky. And as you know, in terms of the rest of the mainland Italy, Naples is considered the south of the south, and it's considered, unfortunately, it's considered to be very backwards and to be the south in its most pejorative sense. So it's a wonderful geopolitical joke. Now we're back on the piazza, and we're getting one of the beautiful musical intermezzos that Tornatore is so brilliant at inserting in his film. And here we see the folklore that he's so interested in. We see the women making tomato paste. Of course, the town crazy pops up everywhere. We saw a woman before spinning. We see someone tending mules. And here we see the young boys being treated for lice. So, and it all happens quite publicly, communally. And this is the collective, town as collective protagonist. By the way, the name of the town is Giancaldo. This is a fictional name. Tornatore himself was born in Bagheria, which is in the outskirts of Palermo. As you know, the film is very, very much an autobiography of Tornatore. More about the town a little bit later, but now we're in the schoolhouse where the fifth graders are taking their elementary school exit exam. And here we get an extremely vivid demonstration of the levels of illiteracy in post-war Italian culture, that 4 grown men have come back to school to take their elementary school equivalency test. And we have these huge, hulking men sort of sitting next to these tiny boys, and in this sort of physical disparity between these full-grown adults and the tiny boys who are at the same educational level, we are getting an incredible indictment of post-war Italian cultural problems here. Alfredo is clearly illiterate, counting on his fingers. And at this point, the sort of interaction between Alfredo and Totò is just so beautifully choreographed. And I'd like to, at this point, have Tornatore himself tell you about the casting of Philippe Noiret in the role of Alfredo, and how wonderfully this fine French actor was able to adapt to the role of the Sicilian projectionist.
The relationship with the actors of the movie was wonderful. I was a lucky director with Cinema Paradiso, because Philippe Noiret is the ideal actor for every director. His style, his elegance, his way to love his work is wonderful. Cinema Paradiso was an Italian-French co-production. This connection was important for the movie, because the French producer, Alexandre Mushkin, very important producer, was the traditional partner of Franco Cristaldi for the most important movies that he made in his life. Mushkin, with his old experience, helped us to resolve some problem with the movie. For example, the character of Alfredo, in my mind, was for an Italian actor, but was impossible to have an Italian actor for that role, because they were not available, because they were not free, or because in that moment nobody was available to make a movie of an unknown director. And only in a second time, Mushkin told me, "Are you available to think about a foreign actor for Alfredo? And if you are forced to choose a foreign actor, what kind of actor could you love?" And I answered, maybe an actor like Philippe Noiret. And Mushkin called Philippe Noiret. Philippe at the beginning was busy for 3 or 4 years for 4 or 5 movies, I don't remember. And Mushkin asked him at least to read the script. Philippe accepted because Myushkin was so important person and so kind, so elegant, and everybody in French, and not only in French, knew him. And Philippe obviously accepted his proposition. And immediately after the reading of the script, Philippe sent a message to me and to Franco Cristaldi. I love the script. I'm available to do all the character of the movie as you want, even the boy. And he refused to make one of the movies that he had in his planning to make Cinema Paradiso. So Myushkin was important even for the episode of the Festival of Cannes. I believe Myushkin had a good role to speak with Gilles Jacob, to show the movie to the French critics that loved the movie. I believe that without the participation of Sanya Myushkin, I don't know if the future of Cinema Paradiso would be the same.
Here we have Spencer Tracy playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and we see the fear, the shrinking in her. This is what I call the couple subplot. This is a woman in the balcony and a man in the pit. She's obviously of a higher social class, but they are obviously romantically interested in each other.
Così puoi lavorare da solo.
Now we have the family picture and the star pinup picture. This film is filled with the idea of this still photograph. It's important. Now we have the boy Peppino, whose father's a communist and who is therefore unemployable in a town dominated by Don Vincenzo, the mafia boss. And Peppino's family is forced to emigrate to Germany.
Ma lo trovano di sicuro e lavora in Germania.
E che io posso sapere mai? È come un'avventura. È il cammino della speranza.
There's an allusion to a film by Jeremy, Il Camino della Speranza, the road of hope of the poor Sicilians who have to emigrate north. And we have just the tragedy of the mass migrations of southern Italians to northern Europe in search of employment. We also have the Cold War polarization between communists and the anti-communist establishment, and we see it played out in microcosm in this scene in Cinema Paradiso. Here we have the newsreel of new spring fashions 6 years after the war, so we're in the early 1950s. Here's John Nee, our character, who's constantly the butt of pranks of the boys in the movie theater. Obviously, no one is interested in watching the newsreels about the new spring fashions, but here is something instead that directly impacts on Totò. This is footage of the Russian campaign and new information that many of the soldiers listed as missing in action have now been reported as, in fact, killed. And we see the image of Totò's father. And Totò is, at that point, puts an editing marker in the reel of the film. He would like to edit death out of the film of his life. In this scene, we have a discrepancy between the soundtrack and the visuals. What we're hearing is what Maria, the mother, and Totò have already heard. And as they walk out against the devastated background of war-torn Palermo, still not rebuilt, the cityscape is a perfect mirror image of the devastation of her inner emotional landscape, having finally heard the news that she has denied for so long. Totò is about to see, though, a movie poster of Gone with the Wind, Via col Vento, with Clark Gable. And he remembers that Alfredo had said that his father looked like Clark Gable, and so Totò believes that, in fact, his father will come back to claim his Scarlet. Back in the movie theater, we're seeing footage from a just smash hit film by the beloved comic actor, also named Totò, The couple subplot, now the man and woman are both in the balcony. The man who has been socially elevated from his place in the pit because he has a wealthy girlfriend. The film that is being shown to the great delight of the masses is, but we also see that some people in the audience are otherwise engaged. We'll talk later about the life cycle events that occur in the audience. This film is called I pompieri di Viggiù, the firemen of Viggiù. And of course, the firemen, the idea, notice here we have a woman nursing her baby, another life cycle event. As we know, that this film is going to cause the fire that will destroy the Cinema Paradiso. So the title is very cleverly an anticipation of a plot development. Totò was absolutely beloved by Italian audiences, and still today you'll find Italian Americans here who love Totò and would do anything to get a hold of DVDs and videos of his films. He was of the Neapolitan nobility, supposedly, and he became this just sort of darling of the sort of comic mime Neapolitan tradition. We have the mutiny, the people sort of in revolt against the fact that there's not room in the theater for them to, and there won't be a second showing. And so this is where Alfredo will come up with the brilliant expedient, which will ultimately, though, spell disaster for the Cinema Paradiso and for himself. Now I'd like to let you hear Tornatore's own words as he talks about the atmosphere on the set during the making of Cinema Paradiso.
The atmosphere with all the actors in the set was like the atmosphere of the movie, with irony, with passion. It was very, very comfortable atmosphere, the shooting of the movie, except the problem with the production. But that's is normal for every movie.
Magari, ma come? Si può fare?
Vedo che voi non volete credere alle mie parole, ma i vostri occhi dovrete credere. E ora alza le chiappe da quel dannato sgabello.
Okay, now Alfredo performs his magic. He performs the miracle of deflecting the image outward onto the piazza wall. And in a way, he has invented outdoor cinema in his own terms. And the piazza then becomes a movie theater, which is highly appropriate given the theatrical nature of Italian urban design. Italian cities are really designed as theaters. And so here we have this beautiful image that sort of glides along the walls of first of the Cinema Paradiso projection booth, and then onto the walls of the piazza itself, onto someone's house, who comes out of his bedroom not amused that his own facade has become a movie screen. But the crowd is thrilled. Everyone is so grateful to the generosity and the ingenuity of Alfredo himself, except the owner of the house. There he is. This is what's going on. Un cinema. And he's in it for the moment. In any event, the Father Adelfio realizes that some people are getting a free ride. And this is a beautiful image of Alfredo and the child accomplice to this miracle. He actually adds soundtrack as well, making it a total sound and light spectacle for the crowd. But we have the hilarity of the people below. In a minute, Father Adelfio is going to realize that he could profit from this enterprise, or his church, his parish cinema could. And luckily, luckily, Totò is invited to go down and join the crowd down below because this is what's going to save his life. Here's notice the movie poster. This film is studded with movie posters, vintage posters that add to the cinemania, the interest of this for cinephiles. Well, they'll charge half price for the tickets since the audience does not even have seats. And everyone is just thrilled at this development, except, of course, the town crazy who sleeps on the monument and who claims that he's in charge of the piazza.
La piazza è mia! Picciotti, non scherziamo, se no mi incazzo!
And he wants no competition for his proprietorship of this particular space. But what's going to happen now is that in the moment in the film when the main character, Totò the comic, is about to be shot, is when the film itself is going to implode. It's going to melt down. Alfredo has not heeded his own constant warnings about the flammability of the silver nitrate celluloid strip, and he has been distracted by his own technological sleight of hand, and now he's paying the price. The film at this point changes genre. It's no longer slapstick where people fall down and get up, and they're just fine. It now becomes a disaster film with the very fast pacing, the scary special effects, the dire music, the very urgent, the sense of impotence and futility on the part of the people who should be taking care of the movie theater itself. And the only character who acts, who tries to intervene, who has agency, is the little boy who bravely and foolishly, but nonetheless successfully, makes his way up into the projection booth and miraculously is able to pull that huge man to safety. He knows that he needs to cover himself with a blanket. He's so resourceful. And we don't know it at this point, but what he does manages to save the life of Alfredo, although everything else goes up in flames. And here we have Father Adelfio and the usher and another man who stand by helplessly in frustration, unable to act, just in a kind of paralysis of fear and horror. And of course, at this point in the film, we too are despairing, like the adults outside the theater, about any possibility of saving the poor projectionist.
Alfredo! Alfredo! Aiuto! Aiuto!
And there's no one to help. This is the first cut that we have back to the present tense of the film. Oh, notice the burning Madonna figure. She was the Madonna who first presided over the Cinema Paradiso when we first walked in, and now she's like a martyred saint. But that was the first return we had to the present tense of the adult Totò remembering. And so it is a reminder to us in the audience that everything we are seeing is within the memory and consciousness of the middle-aged Totò looking back at his life. What we realize with the destruction of the building is that paradise is lost. Paradiso is gone. It's an exile from Eden, from the state of innocence and grace of the Garden of Eden. But paradise will be reconstructed under the secular proprietorship of Don Ciccio, who, remember, he won the lottery and he has money to burn, no pun intended. Now we cut to the facade of the spiffy new rebuilt Cinema Paradiso, the Nuovo Cinema Paradiso, which gives its name to Tornatore's film as a whole. And now we see, we as an audience, along with the inner audience of the inhabitants of the town, are introduced to this new space. So the old, innocent parish cinema that was very Spartan, very austere, has now become an opulent, gold-gilded pleasure dome. Even though that the priest blesses the new theater, he's going to have no power of censorship. He will no longer be the arbiter of the viewing fare of the town. And the supremely competent child, Totò, the 9-year-old Totò, will now, of course, replace Alfredo, and the child labor laws will be waived thanks to Don Cicco's connections with the political higher-ups. We get then, with the new Cinema Paradiso, a liberated cinema, a cinema where kisses are not edited out and where we will see bare flesh, too much to the pleasure of the viewing audiences. And the clip we're seeing now is from a 1952 film called Anna, starring Silvana Mangono. This is her very famous dance scene, which has been anthologized in many films. You might have seen Nanni Moretti's Caro Diario, where the main character dances to a clip of this on television in 1990s Italy. But what we're seeing now in this movie, Anna, is this triumph of sort of sexuality, really the very suggestive dancing of the main character, who also had gained fame in Giuseppe De Sanctis' 1948 neorealist film called Bitter Rice, where she had danced the boogie woogie. And here she's dancing to the Caribbean beat of nightclub music. The priest, Father Adelfio, is not pleased. He kind of resignedly looks on as Vittorio Gassman seduces, really, the main character of the film, Anna, and plants some very suggestive kisses all over her. And at this point, Father Adelfio has reached his limit, and so has an older woman in the crowd who makes the sign of the cross. But as you notice, people do stay and gasp in amazement that this can actually be shown on the screen of their local movie theater. But our priest is going to have to, in a minute, make his objections. And he's going to call this outright pornografia. And he's out of there. But everyone else jeers, and Don Ciccio is pleased as he can possibly be. Totò, who had looked gleefully at kisses, remember, in the earlier scenes, now averts his eyes chastely and looks at an empty stool, which is about to be occupied by someone who looks like an apparition, who looks like a ghost, but it is in fact Alfredo. We find out that Alfredo survived the terrible fire, that in fact Totò had saved his life. He is blind, but he is intact, and he will remain the mentor and the encourager of the little Totò, really for the rest of the film. He might be blind, but he has a kind of superior vision. And here is a very important interchange between Alfredo and Totò, where Alfredo indicates to Totò that he must not remain stuck in the projection booth of the Paradiso, but he must not remain complacent and static, but that he must move on, that he must leave and develop, and because he has to do altre cose, other things, più importanti, much more important. And it's those important things that he will be defining throughout the rest of the film. And now we have an amazing virtuoso effect
Il merito è tuo, Totò, che mi hai salvato la vita.
where the face of the little boy Totò, played by the actor Salvatore Cascio, gives way to the face of Marco Leonardi, the adolescent Totò now. And at this point, the film really neatly divides in half. And the genre of the film actually becomes very, very different. Whereas the first half of the film, the first half of the film that was about the old Cinema Paradiso, was very fast-paced, and it was gag-filled, a lot of broad physical humor. The second half of the film is going to be much more romantic, much more slowly paced. Now we see another example of the audience's rather intimate interaction with what's going on screen. The young boys' sort of coming of age experience as they watch Brigitte Bardot in And God Created Woman. This is one more of the sort of life cycle kinds of events that is happening in the audience of Cinema Paradiso throughout the course of the film itself. And there we have Brigitte Bardot on screen, and then we see that there is a prostitute plying her trade behind the curtains of the Paradiso. She's a kind of minor league Brigitte Bardot, or so she sees herself in that particular role. So we see the way in which people in the town idealize and find their mirror images, the idealized mirror images in characters on screen. Here we have Edward G. Robinson in Little Caesar, and we have the local mafioso boss, Don Vincenzo, who tragically, in this case, identifies with the character on screen, and that identification is taken to the mortal extreme in the scene of his shooting, actually, in the movie theater. Now, part of the techno history of the film that I talked about, we see that film is no longer flammable, that this technology has evolved. Too late, of course, for Alfredo. Now we have a clip from Fellini's I Vitelloni, and we see that the courtship subplot I talked about, the couple where she had been in the balcony and he had been in the audience, now they're both in the audience. Their financial conditions have been reduced. We have the spitter spitting down contemptuously on the plebeians in the audience, but they get their revenge on him. And the revenge of the popular members of the audience. Just as in the film of Fellini, the Alberto Sordi character, they've been making fun of road workers, and the road workers get their revenge on the slackers. Now we cut to the documentary that is being shot by the young fledgling filmmaker, Totò, with his home movie camera. And in fact, we see that one of the first documentaries that he is actually filming after the slaughterhouse is going to be the grand entrance of Elena onto the stage of his life. And she will become, of course, his grande amore, his great love interest throughout the rest of the film. And here his camera is riveted to her already from the very start. Here we are in the school, and now I'd like us to listen to what Giuseppe Tornatore has to say about what it was like to direct these two young actors, Marco Leonardi and Agnese Nanno. And so let's listen to Tornatore.
Even the relationship with all the other actors, the young Marco Leonardi, for example, and Agnese Nanno, they were so young in that period and without a lot big experiences. So I helped them to have the good approach with the character, and even with Marco Leonardi, with Leopoldo Trieste, there were many, and it was a chorus of actors in the movie, and the relationship was very nice, very nice.
Here we're back in the projection booth, which has become a private screening room for the viewing of Totò's amateur footage. Alfredo intuits Totò's inner life from this intimate screening, which he can't even see. He can't even see the fact that there's a beautiful young woman on screen now, but he can infer it from Totò's voice and from Alfredo's own uncanny insight about all things visual. And now at this point, Alfredo is going to begin to philosophize about l'amore, its difficulties, its obstacles, and he's going to make a series of pronouncements about romantic love. He says, beware particularly of blue eyes, but he's going to constantly be warning Totò about the dangers of amorous entrapment in what I call Alfredo's philosophy of life and love. And we're going to find out, of course, that source of that philosophy is the dialogue of Hollywood classical films, spouted by the likes of John Wayne and Spencer Tracy. What Alfredo becomes the mouthpiece for is how to live life as if it were a silver screen. And he is constantly citing the romantic heroes who roam the prairies of the American West and the cities of a mythic and remote place across the ocean. In this scene, Totò's desperate and awkward attempts to woo Elena unfold against the sort of very bleak, windy cityscape of Giancaldo, of the town. And we see the humor and the awkwardness of this budding romance, particularly the awkwardness on the part of Salvatore, Totò, and Elena, who clearly is indifferent to him at this point, and it's going to take a lot for him to really be able to win not only her sympathies, but ultimately her affection and her passionate love for him. And we'll see the trials and the hardships of this romance. And he realizes his own idiocy. The Italian here is not literally translated for the sensibilities of American audiences. Here we have a very important exchange between Alfredo and Totò. Alfredo spends an inordinate amount of time with the old man, and in so doing, he's exposed to Alfredo's ongoing cynicism about the possibilities of romantic love. At this point now, he's going to, he alludes to facetiously to his own desires to be godlike and to intervene in divine creation. It's something, his godlike desires are going to come out in a much more sinister way later on, as I'll tell you. But he's going to now narrate a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale of the princess and the soldier, and it's a very puzzling story about the way in which the young man must undergo a trial of endurance in order to win the love of the princess. And the story does not end the way most fairy tale stories do, that they lived happily ever after, not in this fairy tale, because what Alfredo, he does not believe in the possibility of romantic love and leading to happiness and domestic bliss. And so the end of this fairy tale is going to be extremely puzzling, as you will see. And I'll let the soundtrack emerge here so you can hear actually Alfredo's own way of recounting this very puzzling parable.
Subito il soldato se ne andò là e aspettò un giorno, e 2 giorni, e 10, e poi 20, e ogni sera La principessa controllava dalla finestra, ma quello non si muoveva mai. Con la pioggia, con il vento, con la neve, era sempre là. Gli uccelli ci cacavano in testa e le api se lo mangiavano vivo, ma lui non si muoveva. Dopo 90 notti era diventato tutto secco, bianco, e ci scendevano le lacrime dagli occhi e non poteva trattenerle, che non aveva più la forza manco per dormire. Mentre la principessa, sempre che lo guardava, e arrivati alla 99esima notte, il soldato si alzò, si prese la sedia e se ne andò via.
Ma come? Alla fine?
Sì. Proprio alla fine, Totò. E non mi domandare qual è il significato. Io non lo so.
Of course, he does know what it means. What it means for Alfredo is that the myth of romantic love is based on its non-fulfillment, on its non-consummation, that romantic love is predicated on desire itself that can never be fulfilled because fulfillment would mean disappointment. No fulfillment could ever live up to such expectation. And the cinema is about living in a state of unfulfilled desire that transcends the realities of daily life. A little bit of folklore, the men dancing with each other, because in Sicily, women are sequestered. And here we have Don Ciccio, the proprietor of the Cinema Paradiso, arguing with his distributor. And the film that we're watching was a smash hit film, the smash hit of 1950, a melodrama called Catene, which means chains, by the director Raffaello Matarazzo. You'll notice that the audience is absolutely riveted to the screen, that even Alfredo is in the audience, unseeing, but with his wife who is explaining to him the plot. The tears are flowing from everyone's eyes. Total participation. The entire populace is there emoting, from very young people to the very old, men and women. It's an equal opportunity tearjerker.
Prenda qualche cosa, presto. Su, prenda qualche cosa.
We have Gianni, who knows all of the lines of the film and, interestingly, identifies with all of the characters, not just the male lead, but he knows the lines of the heroine. He knows the lines of the little girl. And this disproves film theories about gendered alignment of spectators, that spectators only identify with their gendered equivalents on screen. This clip shows that not to be true, that identification is total and undifferentiated, that the imaginative identification between spectators and characters knows no boundaries of age or gender or social class. We see that the audience's appetite for the cinema is omnivorous, and that what determines Tornatore's choice of films to include in this great anthology of citations is that he includes everything. That, in fact, he's been criticized for being unsystematic in his choices of films to anthologize. He mixes genres, he mixes high and lowbrow cinema, documentary, he mixes nationalities. There's no hierarchy of genres. There's no system or order to his allusions, but that's precisely the way the audiences receive these films, as installments in one huge amorphous body of film that makes up the cinema with a capital C, indiscriminate and all-encompassing cinephilia. So Tornatore's unsystematic sampling of films reflects quite realistically the way in which movies were consumed by mass audiences at the time. And now let's listen to Tornatore himself as he explains his criteria for choosing the films that he chose to include in Cinema Paradiso.
In Cinema Paradiso, all the movies that I chose to show are connected with the period, obviously. Not only because those are the movies that I prefer in my life. In that age, in that years, the movies that the people love to see more than some others, I decide to show some of them. For example, there is a movie not very important of a very famous comic Italian actor, Totò. It's the I Pompieri di Vigiù. It's not very important movie. But in 1949, the best success in Italian box office was that. So in the scene in which the movie theater is full of people, I decide to show the movie that in that year was the most important success in Italy. In the same time, I love to show some movies that are important in my life. For example, the Visconti movies La Terra Trema is a little not correct story choosing, and a lot of Italian critics refuse this movie because La Terra Trema was not a lucky movie for the box office in Italy. And the movie was refused from the movie theaters after a few days because the movie was shot in Sicilian dialect. So the audience refused the movie because nobody understood anything. So Italian critics hated my decision to show that movie in a popular movie theater like Cinema Paradiso. Isn't true, they told me. It's impossible. My decision was inspired only from the real information that at the beginning, since the movie was in Sicilian dialect, was right that they released the movie in Sicily, even only for a few days. But nobody accepted in Italy this kind of decision. A lot of other movies, I love to show at least one movie by Fellini, like I Vitelloni, because Fellini is one of my favorite directors. So some part of the movies are in Cinema Paradiso because historically they were right in that period. Some others because I love to show them because they are the testimony of my love for some director or for some actor. For example, the little frame in which we can see De Sica with the little boy in the Loro di Napoli is one of my favorite movies. And I love to show this movie in my Cinema Paradiso.
Ho bisogno urgente di voi. Perché ho un dubbio, un gravissimo dubbio che mi
The church offers a humorous pretext for Totò to confess his love to Elena as he kind of usurps the place of the priest in the confessional. And I think this is a good place for me to discuss the role of the church in the film as a whole. As I said, the old Cinema Paradiso was a parish movie house. And the first time that we see the child Totò on screen, he's an altar boy serving the Mass, which is the celebration of the Eucharist, of the communion of the body and blood of Christ, which materializes from the wafer and wine. And this sacrament is called the sacrament of transubstantiation. And I'd like to propose to you that the movie house, the cinema, offers the secular version of transubstantiation, that is through identifying with movie stars. And in Italian, you need to know that the word diva, the female star, means really deity. She's a divinity, and the man would be the divo, so that spectators identify with the divine in their fandom, in their love of movie celebrities. So the idea is that by identifying with these divi, they are transubstantiating, they are transcending the humdrum routines of their daily lives, and they're participating somehow in the divine on the silver screen. And Totò's love life will be determined by this principle of cinematic transcendence, thanks to the intervention of Alfredo, as we'll see in the longer version of the film. And this is something that I would like to discuss with you further on. Here, Totò offers to enact the fairy tale narrative that Alfredo had proposed to him, so that he can win the love of the princess by passing a test of endurance. And this is what we will see enacted in the very next scene.
Dall'incendio del cinema sei sopravvissuto, ma dalle fiamme eterne! Ma dalle fiamme eterne non ti salva nessuno.
Here is Totò standing outside the lovely patrician house of Elena, below her balcony, true romantic fashion, and he had promised he would stay there until she opened her window and opened her heart to him. So we see the calendar, 1954, April, and we see that it has been since April, and now we're in August, that he has been faithfully fulfilling his duty as promised. She is at the window. We see her in silhouette. She knows he's there, but so far does not feel moved yet to open her window and her heart to him. We see him then, we will see him in all climatic conditions, maintaining his promise in the wind and in the rain, just as Alfredo's fairy tale had stipulated. Steadfastly he remains there to prove his love. We're now into October, and now December, actually. December 30th, we're moving on to New Year's Eve, and this, of course, will be a turning point. He sees a party going on, elegant ritual of bourgeois New Year's Eve festivities. We see the windows close, a light turns on, and his hope is kindled. 15 seconds, the countdown to New Year's Eve. He closes his eyes in expectation of the fulfillment of his dream, of his desire. But the shutters close. She has shut him out of her life. And at this point, he turns, and glass starts flying out of windows. This is an Italian ritual of discarding old crockery, old pottery and glass, symbolizing discarding the old year, the debris of the old, to start afresh. And importantly, Salvatore Totò is alone here. He is the only one not celebrating, and he, of course, must go back to work. In the projection booth, he tears the calendar off the projector. He tears it into little bits. It's his way of discarding the recent past, the months of standing and waiting. He had waited for 9 months, way beyond the 100 days of the princess requirement in Alfredo's fairy tale. And he's given up. But his dream is just about to come true. And here we have the reward for his patience and his endurance. His love is requited by the young woman of his dreams. Now let's hear what Tornatore himself has to say about the film's overwhelming sentimentality, for which critics posed real objections, but audiences just loved. And so these are Tornatore's words.
Evidently, critics usually think that this kind of atmosphere is too much popular, maybe. And maybe for this reason they didn't love the movie. I don't know, but it's an old story, the relationship between critics and the story like Cinema Paradiso. Usually they, especially the Italian critics, but not only Italian critics, they don't love this simple way to speak about love, about this kind of pure story, pure characters, sentiment.
Now we have what I call the montage of love, set to music. Here we have a picnic on cactus leaves, and the lovers cavorting about in the beautiful fields surrounding the area of Palermo, a birthday, just a very idyllic lovers' interlude, and then riding along in a jalopy on a country road. The jalopy, of course, breaks down, and the lovers are going to be given a ride back by none other than Elena's father. And remember that her father, Signor Mendola, is the director of a bank, and so there's a significant social class difference between Elena and Totò, and obviously this courtship is not very much to the liking of her father. He would have clearly chosen someone else for her hand. This scene is now the summer movie season is beginning, and this means that the apparatus must be relocated to a site near the beach at the Arena Imperia. Here we have beautiful shots that I think recall again Visconti's La Terra Trema about the fisher folk. And here the fishermen get a free viewing of the film because they're out in the bay, a standing room only. They get to stand in their boats. And the film that we're seeing here is called Poveri ma belli, poor but handsome. It's the genre of rosy realism that was prevalent in the 1950s. The actor is Renato Salvatore, and the year of this film is 1956. The director is Dino Risi. So these are comedies with a Roman accent, and great popularity, as you can see, even outside Rome. But as the camera pans from the movie screen and the entertainment of the crowd to the shed of where the projectionist is, we see Salvatore Totò again alone and pining for Elena, who is away from him for the summer. But not only will this separation be a summer separation, it will also be for the academic year, because Elena will be going to the university at Palermo, as befits her elevated social station. And Totò, of course, cannot afford the luxury of higher education. So their separation looks like it will be indefinite. The film that's being shown at the Outdoor Theater is Ulysses, starring Kirk Douglas. It was an Italian production produced by Dino De Laurentiis, directed by Mario Camerini. The year is 1954, and it's at the beginning of a genre called neo-mythological films. These were otherwise known as sword and sandal films, peplums, sweat spectacles, grunt parades, and they were very, very prevalent in the 50s and early 1960s, starring Steve Reeves, the likes of, Mr. Universe, whatever, and they're always set in antiquity, and they feature rippling muscles, and many actual Hollywood films were actually filmed then in Cinecittà, in outside Rome, and it came to be known as Hollywood on the Tiber. Anthony and Cleopatra was one such film in the early 1960s with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Here, Totò is already thinking of his life as a cinema, as a film, and he is ready to have this moment come to an end, as it would in any good self-respecting film. And here it ends with this wonderful surprise return of Elena and the passionate kiss to celebrate their reunion as lovers. And here, of course, the Cyclops is being defeated by Ulysses. So we have heroes both on-screen and off-screen enjoying their triumphs. Another cut back to the present tense of the film. We seem to cut back to the image of the middle-aged Totò remembering in sort of moments that are turning points. Here we get the transition then to the fact that Totò, the young man, will have to serve the compulsory military service, and that he is ready to depart from his beloved Cinema Paradiso. Don Ciccio reassures him that his job will be waiting for him when he comes back and that he should not be so morose as he contemplates his year of induction into the military. He is anxious because he's made an appointment to meet with Elena on Thursday, which is the day we're seeing now, at 5 o'clock, that she will arrive on the bus. And she will arrive and bid him farewell as he goes off to the army. But as he watches the people dismount from the bus, there is no Elena, and it's 5:10, so she has failed to make the appointment. This is what I call the military montage. We see Totò going through the paces. We see he's desperate to get news of Elena, and his rather strong language earns him a reprimand, obviously, and solitary confinement. We see, much to his chagrin, that his many letters to Elena have been returned, his addressee unknown, added to the pile. But he goes through the rigors of this horrible military year and returns to the piazza, but it is now empty. It's no longer the place of communal life and all the sort of picturesque folklore that had been featured in that space previously. And here he sees it's virtually empty, and it has turned into a kind of desert, and it reflects the desolation of his own heart at this point. There's his replacement, the projectionist of the Cinema Paradiso, and we see that everything has changed and that Totò has returned to a place that he really no longer belongs to at all. The piazza has become a little more than a place for animals, really. The one creature he seems to recognize is the dog, with whom he seems to have a bond. And the car, as you see, has become a chicken coop. So this deserted place has become little more than a barnyard. So he, of course, immediately goes to visit Alfredo, hoping to reconnect, to reconnect with someone he cares deeply about, maybe the person he cares most deeply about from his past, and to sort of be able to forge a continuity with the life that he left before the army. He tries to bring Alfredo out of his reclusive state, his withdrawal from the world. But Alfredo has really sunk into a very deep depression. He's really become completely immobilized, both physically and emotionally. And Totò is making an enormous effort to draw him out. And Alfredo responds by saying, "Take me to the sea." This is a very important scene. It shows us the seductive beauty of Sicily, its static quality. We have the mountains that rim the seashore around the shore of Palermo, an impossibly blue sea. We have this silly exchange between the two of them where Totò is telling a raunchy joke that he learned in the army, and Alfredo does not really respond in kind at all. But he does talk about a destiny, and it's at this point that he shoves Totò out of the nest. He pushes him out. He pushes him away. And what we see visually is kind of an analog to the condition of being stuck in this place. We have anchors that are rusty. So the idea is that people who stay here are held in place. They cannot escape their moorings, and their moorings have become rusty with disuse, and their immobility. And at this point, Alfredo pushes him away and says, stay away for a long time. And then, only then can you come back and make this place yours again and rediscover its people. But you need that distance, both spatially and temporally, in order to be able to do that. And this is, of course, what Totò will do. He will go off to Rome, and he will only return as a middle-aged artist. And upon returning, he will then reconnect with his homeland, and he will make it into art, but only after a long and difficult separation. Here we see that Alfredo is projecting onto Totò his own thwarted ambitions, the sense that he, Alfredo, has been stuck, that he's a rusty anchor. Here, Totò is in the throes of a decision. He is obviously thinking deeply about what Alfredo has just told him and making the choice to leave. And at this point, we're going to see that the young Totò, in this position of thinking and agonizing decision-making, modulates into the middle-aged Totò, who's also in the throes of a decision. It's the decision whether or not he will, in fact, finally make the return that Alfredo had prophesied way back then on the beach. Here we get the beautiful acoustic link, again, the craftsmanship of this film, the acoustic link between the clock that was chiming in Totò's Roman apartment and now the bell of the train station, signaling the train that will take Totò away definitively from his homeland. Alfredo, who is forbidding him to return, pushing him brutally away and defying him to return, commanding him not to give way to nostalgia. And in the background we have his mother Maria and his sister Leah, who are witnessing to this scene of brutal banishment, really, which is what it boils down to. And Alfredo is urging Totò to take up something that he loves, something that he's impassioned by. And of course, without saying it, we know it's going to be the cinema. The classic scene of the departure on the train. Here's Father Adelfio coming a little bit too late to bid him give him a farewell hug. But they're all there to wish him well as he sets off on his journey to the big city and to the career they all know that he will embark upon. Giancaldo, let me tell you about the name of the city. As I said, it's a fictitious name, Giancaldo. John is John, and that's why I've called that minor character Gianni. Caldo means warm, and this is the place of warmth and memory and nostalgia and youth. It's that warm spot of the past to which now the middle-aged Totò can finally return. A word about the actor, Jacques Perrin, and here I would like us to listen to the words of Giuseppe Tornatore about the casting choice of Perrin in the role of the middle-aged Totò.
Jacques Perrin, he was so polite with me because when we started the shooting of the movie, we had not the actor to make Totò, old Totò. And I talked to Jacques Perrin after 1 week of shooting, and I decided to give him the role only through telephone. And Jacques accepted this very strange way to be involved to make a movie. And we had no time for the costume, and I asked him to take his real costume of his life. So he arrived in Sicily with all his costume. And Brigitte Fossé, I love her because in the famous cut of the movie, I decided to cancel all her character. In the short version, she disappeared. And when I was in Cannes with the short version, and she was in the crowd near me, I was so sad and so embarrassed to speak with her. And with a little laugh, she told me to be quiet because she was able to understand the reason of my cut. And even the experience with the little boy was exciting.
We're now into the third part of the film. The film is really a three-part work. And as you know, it was originally much longer. The director's cut was 170 minutes. That is 2 hours and 50 minutes. But it was drastically cut in the editing room down to 125 minutes, the version that you're seeing now with this commentary, because the longer version was considered really unacceptable for commercial purposes. I would like Tornatore to tell you now at this point about his travails with the film's various cuts.
I decided to cut the movie by myself because after the first releasing of the movie in Italy, what the people of movie business loved to tell was that disaster of the movie was for the long timing of the movie. I was not agree with them. But one day I decided to make the only cut that was possible to do after the release of a movie. I cut only a part of the movie, the meeting between the old Totò with the old Elena, and other 2 or 3 scenes connected with this meeting. And after I called my producer, and I told him, okay, since everybody saying that if the movie was shorter, it could have a big success, now you can show me that that's true. Now the movie is 2 hours. I believe it's a good timing. The first reaction of my producer was not happy. What happened to the movie? What did you cut? Did you destroy the movie? After I show the new version, and I explained him that the only cut that was possible to do without to cut all the movie from the beginning was that. And he was agree with me. And the distributor decided to release the movie for the second time. But anything changed in the reaction of the critics and in the position of the public that was not informed about the existence of the movie. After the Academy Award, a lot of other different versions of the story, usually journalists and critics love to tell. For example, that was the producer to cut the movie. It's not true. It was not in the style of Franco Cristaldi to cut a movie without to speak and to work together with the director. I cut the movie by myself. The short version had a big success in Cannes and after over the world. The reason is especially because all the public of the world knew only this version. Nobody can believe what kind of reaction the audience in the world could have with the other version. But in that moment, in Cannes, we obviously decided to show the short version for natural reason. And that version was the success of the movie. I was in many countries with that movie, and I met a lot of different people of different culture, different languages, and every place they loved the movie in the same way. Maybe because the position of the public about a story like that in a timing of 2 hours and 5 minutes, because this is the shorter version, is 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Ma perché mi date lei? Una volta non era così.
È una persona importante.
This is part of the techno history that technology has made the cinema obsolete, what with videos and now, as we know, DVDs. Here, Totò says to Don Ciccio, why are you giving me the lay form? Why are you speaking to me in the formal form? You didn't used to. And Don Ciccio says, well, you've become so important, but if you like, I will return to using the tu form with you. And at this point, Don Ciccio says, who would ever have thought that that little squirt could become this famous movie maker? Now, with the death of Alfredo, of course, we have symbolically the death of the cinema itself. I'd like to hear a quote, something that Tornatore himself said once, quote, "The movie house at the center of the town is like a pulsating heart," end quote. And I love this metaphor because if the movie house is a heart, then the town is a body. It's a corporate, collective unit. And what keeps it alive is the movie house. And we saw then in the first half of the film how much life is actually lived within the movie house, that life cycles are experienced. We saw, you'll remember the couple copulating. We saw a woman breastfeeding. We see young teenage boys coming into sexual maturity. We have Don Vincenzo dying in the movie theater. We saw the couple's subplot as we saw the courtship, and we saw the engagement, and we saw them with their baby. And now in this crowd following Alfredo's funeral procession, we see them all gray and aged. Now, as Totò walks through this dilapidated movie theater, I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about the film's longer version. I hope that you will look at it on your own. And I want to tell you, though, a brief personal anecdote. Years ago, I showed the film to a group of American students who were studying abroad with me in Italy, and I rented the only version of the film available in Italian video stores, which was the director's cut. Now, neither I nor my students had seen the director's cut, and we didn't even know it existed. So as we were watching the film, at a certain point, my students let out a collective gasp. The film included footage that they hadn't expected to see. They were shocked. And the film ceased to be their Cinema Paradiso. And I'm using the word their quite strategically because they had come to possess this film. They had internalized it, and it had become part of their own private Cinema Paradiso, their own private storehouse of memory and nostalgia. And they had the mistaken assumption, as most of us have, that the filmic text is somehow stable and absolute and unchangeable. So what the longer version includes is a rather momentous meeting between the middle-aged Totò and Elena, who had since married, and she married Boccia, the class dimwit, you'll recall, who had become a politician. No comment. When Totò and Elena do meet up, they make love, but only once. And more important even than the consummation of their romance is what we learn about Alfredo's role in their breakup. You'll remember that Elena had not arrived on the 5 o'clock bus as per the arrangement, and this then signaled the end of their relationship. At this point, she disappears from Totò's life forever. But we learn in the longer version of the film, she did in fact arrive, and Totò had run off to find her. When she came back to the projection booth, she had found Alfredo alone there, and they had a discussion in which he convinced her to end the romance, saying that it was in Totò's best interest to leave Sicily, to leave love behind, and to pursue a career in Rome. Elena follows Alfredo's advice and, in fact, withdraws from the relationship. When Totò returns then to the projection booth, Alfredo lies to him and says that Elena had never come. Now, when the middle-aged Totò finds this out, he's furious. He's absolutely enraged that Alfredo would have intervened in his life and would have thwarted the course of romance, that Alfredo had played God. and had really rewritten the script of this young boy's life. And we realized that Alfredo at this point has become a very dark character. He's no longer the completely benign, benevolent teacher and father figure and guide and friend and mentor, but that instead that he has preempted the young boy's own freedom to make a decision. Alfredo's own idea of art is that great art can only be created at the sacrifice of domestic happiness, that art and love are diametrical opposites, that they preclude each other, and that great art can only be made in the absence of the fulfillment of desire, because great art is made in quest for that impossible fulfillment. So Alfredo has defined art, and he has defined love, and he has seen them as mutually exclusive choices, and he's made that choice for Totò. What Totò then objects to is the fact that he was not able to define those terms himself, and if a choice had to be made, he was not allowed to make that choice on his own. And so instead, he had to be a screen onto which Alfredo projected his own thwarted desires for heroism and stardom and artistic genius. So as we see the Cinema Paradiso explode in this scene, what has also exploded has been a myth of a benign past, a past in which Alfredo has played the part of the wonderful, benevolent father, and instead a much more sinister possibility has emerged. And it's the sinister possibility of a life modeled on cinema-induced desires for fame and power. So the shorter version of the film is a much sunnier vision of what the paradise of cinema really was. The longer version of the film makes us realize that paradise is always double. It's both the place of innocence and bliss, but it's also the place of the fall, and hence the place of guilty knowledge. So at this point, I think we're ready to interpret the final scene of the film, the glorious, glorious scene where Totò looks at the reel of footage that Alfredo had bequeathed to him after his death. And so we're going to fly with Totò now back to Rome and enter the film studio, where he will then screen this footage and take in the meaning for his life. So he arrives, and we find out from this comment that he's just made a terrific film, that he's a success, and this we already knew. But here he sits alone. Again, he's alone. This is very important in the screening room of the studio, and he beholds this glorious montage of all of the kisses that have been edited out of the films under the censorship of Father Adelfio in the old Cinema Paradiso. And we realize that this is Alfredo's way of restoring to Totò what he had edited out of the young man's life. That is, all of the passionate kisses that the young man had to give up in order to make the film that we just saw. Now, I'd like the kisses to speak for themselves. I'd rather not be speaking over this beautiful montage. I would like you to just enjoy it in its own terms. I didn't want to speak during the kiss montage because I thought it would have been a profanation of the space of paradise. But now that it's over, I wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed leading you through this film. And it's doing on this running commentary has been a wonderful exercise for me. It's changed my relationship to the film entirely. And I hope in some way it's made a difference for you as well. I hope you will look at the longer version of the film and think about the differences between the two and how interesting both of them are. Tornatore himself, when asked, actually, which he preferred, refused to state a preference. He says he loved them both, and the difference between the two reflected his own evolving relationship, actually, to the story itself. I hope the same will be true of you, and I hope that you too will keep this film in a very cherished place in your own paradise of cinematic memory. Thank you. Buonasera.